So welcome back from Thanksgiving break. I hope you all had a great weekend. Welcome to the last 2 weeks of class, right? So time to panic. No, I'm kidding. At least in this class, hopefully everything is going to go smooth, right? I try. So we have 4 regular class days left, and then you'll come in on the last day and you'll turn in your portfolios. Generally, everybody wants to look at everybody else's portfolio, so we put them on the back table. I bring donuts. You guys eat donuts and are happy. That's the idea, at least. And then I will ask you guys to fill out an online survey about what you thought of the course, what worked, what didn't work. It's anonymous, but it helps me change and tweak things in the class to make the class better. So I'll ask that you guys do that, as well as turn in your portfolios. Timing for you guys on that last day is essentially identical to normal, except that you get out at 10 instead of 11. So you show up at 8, get done at 10. You may have a final at 10:30, so make sure you check final schedule because things change. And just kind of be aware of that. There is no class or final or anything on that Wednesday. So this class spans 2 final slots. So the way the final schedule works, if you're in another class and you might have 2 different classes, one final would be on one day, one final would be on the other day. Since our class is 3 hours, I make the final due on the first day, so you just get the second day off. That way we're done with this class and you guys can focus on something else. So as of 10 on that Monday the 12th, everything has to have been turned in. So I don't accept anything after 10 o'clock on that day. And I generally try my absolute best to have the grades done either that day or the Wednesday after. So it's usually within a couple days. So you shouldn't have to wait until January to find out your grades or anything. I try to be really on top of it. Just make sure that everything's turned in at that point, because I close everything down and that's it. Okay. So in the coming days, today we're going to talk about sections and how to create a section in Collage and Photoshop. It is a lot of repetition. So we already did the elevation. The section is shockingly similar to the elevation. So we'll do a lot of the same things over again, but I will go through the whole process to remind you of how you actually do it, etc. On Wednesday this week, we will do a perspective view, which is kind of the fun one, because that's when we really integrate everything that we've learned into one particular drawing. So we'll do that one on Wednesday, and then next week, it's a little bit up in the air. I'm not sure what exactly we'll do each day. You'll probably be working on your portfolios. You'll probably be catching up on work that you haven't done, those kinds of things. And that's the nature of the end of the semester is, everybody panics, and the time that you have to work is probably a good thing. So that's kind of how we round out the last 4 days of class. Hopefully everything goes smoothly for your other classes as well. But at least in my control, I try to make it work itself out easily. So today we're going to start talking about doing sections. And sections essentially are critical because we're going to slice through the building in some key way to show relationship of spaces. And all too often as young designers, architecture students, etc., you focus on the plan. It's easy to conceptualize the plan. It's easy to count the square footage of the plan. When I asked you all to design a building, your cabin, this building, the first thing that you did was draw the plan, correct? Okay, so it's automatic that you think that. The further along in your architectural career you go, the more you actually start designing in section rather than in plan. And it seems a little counterintuitive because you're like, whoa, wait, why would I do that? I need to know where the spaces are and how they lay out next to each other. And of course you need to know that. But what sections do is they show us as architects what it's like to be in a particular space. We never experience a building from a plan perspective. We don't think about that part of it. If we're standing in this room, for example, we see the section of the building. That's the kind of spatial relationship that we have. So if you have a building that has an overlook from one level down to another level, or one level out to a view, or something like that, showing that particular room or the ceiling height is critical to really understanding what it's like to be in the space and what it's going to feel like to be in the space. So section drawings are really one of the most critical drawings you can show in an architectural design or a presentation. Those are the ones that your reviewers are going to care about because they explain what your building feels like to be in. Okay? So we're going to concentrate today on creating a really nice section through our building. And one of the key pieces of creating a section is identifying how to draw the section and which section is the right view to see. And so if, for example, we started with the first section, I could use it very similar to the elevation view in that I can come to the section tool here, and I could drop the section right on the front of my building, and I could then move that section plane right back through my building. And at some level, let's put it there, for example, right, we can see into the building. Okay? This particular section view certainly gives us an understanding of this side and the main room, living room on that side of the building. Okay? If I move that section back a little bit further, right, it would cut through the hallway, and we get an idea that the main room is connected to the hallway, which is then connected to the room. But I also end up with some kind of awkwardness over here because it's cutting through a closet. It's not really showing the building. So you have to think very carefully about where in the building you want to cut. Right? So there it's the kitchen, the bathroom, and the bedroom. Okay? Again, not that exciting. Right? Okay, but not super exciting. And I could pull myself back out, right, to find some happy medium, so maybe something like this. This wouldn't be a bad place to try a section. Sometimes it takes more than one section kind of to decide which one's right. Right? So I'm going to delete that one for a second. Maybe not. And I'll try it again. I'm going to go ahead and delete. Well, we'll leave the plan section there for a second. Let me try taking the section the opposite way. All right, so let me take the section, and this time I'll move over onto the back, and I'll take the section looking this way. Let me go ahead and move this section toward the building. Okay, so now in this context, we're seeing out toward the view here. We're cutting through the stair, kind of the entry level. That's kind of an interesting piece of the building. We're still cutting through the bathroom, but we're seeing part of the bedroom with the closet. So this could end up being okay. Now, I don't have all the detail. I don't show the closet there. So there's certainly, if I had more detail, this section would be a little bit better. So just by flipping the direction, which way I'm looking, this section starts to be a little bit more interesting. Okay? If I pushed it forward still, we could get to a place where we're seeing the bedroom. Let's see, right there. Right? We're seeing the bedroom part here, and we're seeing the main room here. But we really don't have much of the main room left. No room for furniture or anything like that. So it might not be the ideal place to put the section. I could also take my section sideways through the building. So let me go ahead and pull this sideways. And one of the nice things about SketchUp is we can dynamically go through and decide where this section is going to be. In my opinion, Rhino's a little bit better at doing sections. They're a little bit more complicated, but you don't get this live preview as you cut through the building. And the live preview, certainly at an early design level, can be very useful. So here in this context, we're cutting through the building, and we're seeing there's my whole living room. Right? Now we're cutting through that bathroom and hallway, and then we can end up in the two bedrooms, looking at the two bedrooms. Okay? So maybe something like that is going to show us the relationship of the two bedrooms and how they work together. So when you're thinking about your section, you want to move around and you want to think about which section is the right view, which is the one that I want to show in the context of this building. So let me move back a little bit, and I'll take a section through the main room like this as an example section. Okay? And again, I'm picking this rather arbitrarily, but you could pick a different section. You can pick it in any direction you want. I wanted to pick one that was distinctly different than the elevation view for the demonstration purposes. Okay? So I have this view, right, with my section set. Remember, currently it's still in perspective. So I need to make sure that I go up and change. Let's go ahead and turn off my section planes so that it's all white. And then let me go to my camera, standard views, and I can go to my left or right view. And I forget which one it's going to be. It's probably the other one. Let's try the right view here. Oops. There we go. There's the left view. Okay, let me also change from perspective to parallel projection so that it is, in fact, a true elevation view. And we'll zoom in a little bit so that we can see my whole building. There. This piece over here really doesn't matter. That was holdover from when we cut the plan, so I'll go ahead and get rid of that piece. And now we have my building and my section. Now you see that I struck out on this the part about doing the section cut face because it's not installed on your computers and you can't install it without admin privileges. So we're going to skip that part of it, and we'll do it in Photoshop after the fact. OK, so I have this here. I'm going to go to View again. I'm going to turn off my shadows so that I have no shadows. I'm going to go to View. I'm going to turn off my axes. And I'm going to go to View, and I'm going to turn off my guides. So all I have left is just my plain basic lines drawing. This should look very familiar to the things that I've done before. And I'll go to File, Export, 2D Graphic. And we'll save this into today's folder, which is what? 129. This would be fall of 2016. And this is underscore lines. I'll click on Options and make sure it's still set to be large, which it is. In your case, it may or may not still be in that size. I'll go ahead and say Lines, and then Export. So now I have this. Now in this view, the X-ray may be beneficial because we see more of what's happening beyond. So I'm going to go over to my Edit. I'm going to go to the Face Settings, and then click on X-ray. And we see a little bit of what's happening beyond in the building here. We'll go ahead and go to File, Export, 2D Graphic. And I'm going to call this one X-ray. And export. We'll turn back off the X-ray view. And I'm going to turn on the shadows. So we'll go to View and then Shadows. There. And remember, I may want to adjust the time of day or the time of year to see if I can get a shadow pattern that looks interesting. Okay? So something like this looks pretty interesting. The problem is that these windows are cast because I've cut this half of the building open. Right? So realistically, that wouldn't be in shadow. The rest of this would be in shadow. So it's not bad, and it's certainly better than it was before. So maybe something like that will look pretty good with this little pattern on the wall. Okay? So then I'll go back to my edge settings over here. I'm going to turn off edges. And let me go to View. And I'm going to turn off section cuts. Hold on a second. I want to see that again. Yeah, I'll go ahead and turn off section cuts. This piece isn't going to matter. This is the shadow that I'm interested in. And I'll go ahead and go to File, Export, 2D Graphic. And this is going to be Shadows. Click Export. Let's turn back on my edges. Turn back on my section cuts. There we are. And now I'm going to go back and turn off the shadows. So we'll go to View, and I'll uncheck Shadows. And we'll go back into my sketchy edge styles. And we're going to pick the pen gray right there. But I do have to go back and uncheck section plane. So it goes white again, and then uncheck the guides. There it is. I'll go to File, Export, 2D Graphic. And this was my pen gray. Export. And then I'm also going to use the airbrush with endpoints right here. View, uncheck section planes, uncheck guides, and File, Export, 2D Graphic. So this should seem very routine by now because we've done it over and over again. Oops, this is airbrush. And I'll export that as well. Now I did do one that was colored early on that may help distinguish the background or the foreground. I actually don't like that one. Let me go back to default styles. Yeah, something like this. This is just going to allow me to help pick certain regions. So I'll go to, let me go back to Edit, edge settings. We'll turn off the profile so we have just the colored regions. Let me turn off the guides, the axes, and then I'll export 2D graphic. And we'll call this one color. And that could just help me select, say, the sky versus the ground, or something like that. OK, so all of those are now done and saved. Now I'm going to move over into Photoshop. So let me go ahead and open up Photoshop here. All right, Photoshop's open. We'll go to File, and then Open, and I'll open that first line drawing. Right there as lines. Open. There it is. And then we'll place in everything else. So I'll go to File, Place, and we'll bring in the airbrush. Confirm, File, Place. We'll bring in the color. Confirm. File, Place, bring in the pen gray, we'll go File, Place, bring in the shadows, File, Place, and we'll bring in the X-ray. OK, so I've dropped all of those there. All of the layers have shown up here. I'm going to spend a moment and do a little bit of organization. So let's take the airbrush and the pen gray and put them up top. The X-ray, the shadows, and the color can be down the bottom. I'm going to right-click on the locked background layer and say Layer from Background, so that it's a live layer instead. And then I'm going to go through and rename these. Remember, when we start to have lots of layers, it's helpful if I have named the layers so that I can easily go through. So let's go ahead and call this one Lines. And then we can rename these other ones as well. So this would be Color. This would be Shadows. This would be X-ray. Pen, gray, and airbrush. Just easier to see those names. OK, so now airbrush through colored background, all of those need to be changed to be multiply, so that we're going to shine through and see all of them as semi-transparent. We'll turn off the airbrush and the pen gray. Let's turn off the color for a second, and let's start with just the shadows view. OK, so with the shadows, we have to make a few corrections on the shadows layer. So I'll make sure that shadows is highlighted here. I have to get rid of that piece, because obviously that shadow doesn't exist. It's a smart object, so before it's going to let me, I have to right-click and say Rasterize Layer. And then I'll be able to get rid of that piece. Then I also, press Control+ here for a second, I need to fill in this shadow into this area right there. So we'll make a little selection. I'm going to use the paintbrush tool, but I need this gray. So I'll use the eyedropper tool to select that color of gray. Then I'll switch to the paintbrush, and I'll paint that piece in, because all of that is under the same little bit of shadow. I can also get rid of this little piece right there, because that little piece is part of the section cut. Okay? So now I've corrected the shadows, because that was an easy stage to correct the shadows. I don't have any shadows on the back half of the building because of the way the sun is shining, but I do have them right here on the front half. So that's good. And I can come back and do a dodge and burn on those shadows and touch them up. But I want more in the drawing before I worry about that just yet. So let's think about how the building hits the ground. And so in this sectional example, the ground becomes very important. And I have the building currently kind of floating there. So we need to adjust that. So let me go ahead and create a brand new layer. And I'm going to call this layer Ground. And we'll move it up to the top of the layer stack so it's in front of everything else. So because this is kind of on a hill, I need a kind of a natural slope that's going to go down here. Furthermore, I have enough of a foundation in the building to where it's going to be higher in the back and slope down toward the front. So I need to go ahead and make a selection for that. And I'll use the lasso tool right here to go ahead and draw that. Let me zoom out a little bit so I see everything. And I'm going to start over here on the side. And I'll draw a line that goes along here that slopes down. And then I'll draw it all the way around the border and wind up right back there. So I end up with that kind of sloping line that's going down. And you see how it kind of slopes its way down. That's what I want. Let's go ahead and paint that in with a color. So I'll use the paintbrush tool, and I'm going to paint not with the gray, but with a much darker gray. Actually, let's go all the way to black. Okay? And I'll go ahead and I'll paint that in as black at the bottom here. We can always change that to be a different color using one of the adjustment layers after the fact. So I have that nicely filled in. That represents the ground. But once again, I'd like there to be a little bit of texture on the ground. I'd like there to be some grass. So I'll use the grass brush using the clone stamp. My grass brush should be right there, 134. And I'll probably have to adjust the size a little bit. So let me zoom in. Now remember, as I do the grass brush, I hold down Alt to copy from, and then we start. Looks like my grass brush needs to be a little smaller, and then we can go ahead and start to create the grass that's here. All right, I may have to reset by holding Alt where I'm copying from. There we go. Let's move up toward the building. All right, so I'm not going to worry too much about what's happening in the building here, because remember, I'm cutting all the way through this building. So because I'm cutting all the way through the building, right, I'm going to go ahead and just skip over to the next side of the building, and I'll do this last piece of grass. So let me hold down Alt, and once again, we'll copy along here. Like that. And we're working our way up into the building here. Let me hold down Alt, copy from over there, and we'll finish this off. Right, like that. So I make sure I go all the way to the edge. And there may be a few little pieces that you can go back and touch up a bit. Let me press Control-0 so we can see the whole thing. And that essentially softens up the ground quite a bit and makes it feel like it's part of a natural field or something. Now, because I've cut through the building, I want to apply the same black bottom to the cut of the building. So let me go ahead and I'll use the magic wand, and I need to make sure that I'm on the base lines layer here, and I'll select the inside of the building, or excuse me, the inside of the section cut. I'll hold down Shift. I've selected all of the inside there. I'll move myself back up to the ground layer. I could also create a brand new layer for clarity and call this section cut. And I could then paint inside the building here as black. So now if I step back, Control minus here, we can see that I'm really identifying what's been cut through with this dark black color. Okay? And it's possible that the black ends up being a little bit too strong, but remember, we can apply a hue and saturation adjustment to change that black. I'll show you that here in just a second. Let me go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Hue and Saturation. Okay, all I have to do is on this lightness scale, I can adjust and make that gray to black, whatever the right value is. Okay? Now, this happens to be applying to the whole layer stack. I can tie it to specific layers if I wanted to, remember. Control-Alt-G ties it just to that one layer. I could duplicate this layer, and I could apply that, Control-Alt-G, just to the ground layer as well. Does that make sense for how I made those changes? if I wanted to. For right now, we'll go ahead and turn those off so that we're back at the black layer, and we'll keep working from here. Okay, so I have those already established nicely. I have my shadow established the way I want. Let's start to think about what the inside of the building is going to look like. So in this context, the inside of my building is a concrete wall. At least that's what I envisioned it. So I'm going to go ahead and find a concrete texture to put as that wall. So I'll go online. Let me open up Chrome here and search.creativecommons.org. I'm going to do a Flickr search for tiling concrete texture. And we'll see what I come up with. Okay, so maybe something like this. This happens to be some stone tiles, but it might look good on the inside of the wall. Okay, we'll use that as an example. I'll go ahead and download this in the original size. Let me show it in my folder. Let me copy it and put it into today's folder. Go ahead and paste this. There it is. I'll go back to Photoshop. I'll go to File and then Place. And we'll drop that into my building here. Obviously, significantly too large, so let's make this smaller. I'm holding down Shift to keep it in proportion. And let's zoom in a little bit. And I need to make sure that the scale feels right. Right, so that those tiles aren't too big. So it's maybe something along those lines or so. I'll go ahead and say OK to confirm, and there it is. I want this to tile and to repeat on itself. So I will go ahead, as long as I'm on this layer, I'll use the rectangular marquee and drag a box around my tiles. It just needs to be larger than the tiles. I'll go to Edit and then Copy, and then I'll go to Edit and then Paste, and I'll get a second copy of that image. We'll bring them together so that they tile, and it doesn't look like these are the best tiling images because the colors don't quite match. But we'll go ahead and pretend that it's OK. Drop that there. Drop that there. And we'll drop this one right there. Okay, so I'm not a huge fan of how those look, but they'll work for what I'm trying to do. Okay, so I have those 6 images placed. Oh, looks like they're not quite tall enough, so I need a few more. There they are. I want, and you see that it created a bunch of layers. I want all of those selected layers to be merged into one layer. So I'll go up to Layer, and I will go to Merge Layers, which will take all of those and make them one layer. So now that they're all one layer, I'll rename them to be Tile Background. And then I need to establish a mask on this layer so that these are cut out. So let's turn off those tile backgrounds. We can turn off the section cut. We can turn off the ground. Let's move the tile background there. Let's use on the lines layer. Let's go ahead and use the magic wand to select the interior region, which is right there. Once it's selected, I can go back to the tiled background layer, turn it on, and click the Add Layer Mask button. And it will then cut out the image that I have for the background, something like that. So if I zoom out a bit, we can now see that background, and we can turn on the ground and the section cut so you can kind of see what that's looking like. Okay? Now maybe this is a little bit strong, so let me go on the tile background layer. Let me go ahead and just adjust the opacity down a bit. We'll go to maybe, I have to do it a little bit for what it looks like on the screen rather than what it looks like on my screen here. Yeah, maybe something about like that. So now I have that piece there as well. Okay? Now, maybe I want to mimic what it would look like to have some lights on in this building. Maybe I want to show what those look like. So I'm going to go ahead and create a layer, create a new layer here. It needs to be on top of this tile background layer. And I'm going to rename this layer to be lighting. Okay? So I have the lighting layer active. Under the blending mode, I'm going to choose soft light as my blending mode. It's one we haven't used before, but I'm going to go ahead and use soft light. And then I'm going to use a brush. And that brush needs to be very, very soft. So sorry, it needs to be all the way here at 0%. And the size obviously needs to be smaller. Then I'm going to pick a foreground color of kind of a yellowish color. So maybe something like that. Okay? And then I'm going to start up here by the roof, and we'll do just a single dot. And I'll come down a little bit, and I'll increase the brush size, and I'll work my way down the wall. I'm just hitting the bracket key as I do this to slowly kind of wash the light. And I don't know whether, can you guys see that a little bit? It's really hard. Let me darken the background here, and let me duplicate. Okay, maybe you can see it now a little bit more. Okay, so obviously the background is much darker than I wanted. The key is identifying where. Let me go back to my lighting layer. Where the light starts from. Why are you not changing your size? On the lighting layer. Right, so the light starts up at the ceiling. We start at a small cone. Then we work our way up as it comes down. Toward the ground. You guys see how that cone kind of flares out? Because that's what light tends to do. If you look at the back of the room, we have 3 lights on the wall, or 3 lights in the ceiling. If you look at the wall, see how there's a cone for each light? Right? That same principle happens whenever we create the lighting. So let me do one more example here, right from the center. So we'll start small, and I'll work my way up as I come down. And there we go. So now I have lighting on that back wall. I've created the lighting for that. Okay? And again, I deliberately increased the background vibrancy so that it's visible on here. When I do the final version, I'll probably turn that off so that it's a much lighter, much more subtle look. Okay? So I now have this. It's probably time to add some people. Right? One of the key elements to creating a good quality section is to put people in it, because that's how we understand a sense of scale. That's how we understand how big a building really is. So I'm going to go ahead, and if you guys remember, we did a bunch of work on the course website that you posted earlier in the semester where we cut out people. So yes, I was trying to teach you how to cut things out and do masking, but I also had this in mind so that you could come back and use these and not have to cut them out again. So we'll go to Resources and then Collage Images. You may already have some available, right? So there's a person here. I can choose, do I want the black and white version, do I want the color version, or do I want the silhouette version? And it depends on the look that you're going for as to which version is really the right version. Right? Let me go ahead and download each. All right, let's put them into today's folder. All right, so I have all of those, and then I can choose to drop them into this scene. So I'll go to File, and then Place, and again, I have to pick which version I want. So maybe I'll try the black and white version first, right? I know that this is a doorway, so I need to make sure that the person is scaled appropriately for the doorway. So maybe his head should be about there. And we'll make the person a little bit taller. Actually, I think that doorway is a little bit larger than a normal doorway. So that seems about right for the person. Now I have to make sure, if I look down at his feet, that his feet are at the right place. If he's floating like that, it's not going to work. Right? So I'll move him down so that he's standing on the ground, about like that. Now I picked an image that his feet were pretty close to being on the ground. You have to be careful when you're picking an image that the image isn't too much in perspective. We want essentially an elevation or a sectional view of the person so that they're standing and you're getting not too much of a perspective view. So if you're struggling, we'll go ahead and commit to that for a second. There's the person. Seems fairly reasonable, right, standing there. The other option, remember, of course, principles of composition probably dictate that this person should be over here. Maybe something like that. Okay. If this isn't really looking right, a lot of times you can get away by, instead of using the actual photograph, use the silhouette. Because by using the silhouette, you're taking a lot of the perspective away, and you're now only seeing the shadow of the person. So if you're struggling to get the person to look correct in your view, go ahead and just use the silhouette version. Okay? Again, I can make the silhouette version a different shade. So let's turn off the first one here, the black and white. I can make the silhouette person black, like the background, by adding an adjustment layer. So I'll go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and we'll do a hue and saturation adjustment. I'm going to tie that directly to the man. So Control-Alt-G. And then I will adjust the lightness so that the person ends up being black, which then matches the background. Do you guys see how I did that? Now this starts to feel like it's part of the section cut, which can be beneficial as well. We can move this person, oops, sorry, make sure I'm on that layer. We can move this person over as well. Like that. Okay? It wouldn't make sense for me to have him facing the wrong direction. In this case, I do have some windows, so it might work, but really he's looking toward us more than away from us. So it doesn't quite work in this context, but you want to think about compositionally where he fits as part of the image. Okay? So let's do a little bit of dodging and burning on the shadows layer. We'll come back to the shadows here. We'll do a layer, new layer. We'll call this shadows D and B. This is going to be an overlay filled with a neutral gray color. And I'm going to tie it Control-Alt-G directly to the shadows layer. And then we'll do a little bit of dodging and burning on that. And go ahead with the burn tool here, a little bit larger. We're just going to darken up that edge a little bit more. Right. Something like that. And we could even lighten up using the dodge tool here. We could lighten up the edges of the shadows just a bit. Something like that. So we just tweak the shadows just a little bit so they're not quite as strong. OK, so I now have those. I have the lighting on the inside of the building. I have my section cut. I have my people. The last thing would be to add the airbrush and the pen gray, which are the little bit of the stylized version. Let's put the airbrush and the pen gray, however, up on top of the layer stack so they're on top of everything else. Right? They shine over that way. So I just want to make sure that that is part of my overall layout. By the way, all the steps that I've done are available on the course website under the tutorial section. If you go to Assembly 10.3, SketchUp to Photoshop, this has a bunch of actual images with how they work and what I've done as part of these images. Okay? So we've gone all the way through. The only thing that I haven't dealt with is any kind of background. So I'll go ahead and add the background as the next piece of this puzzle. Okay, so let me press Control-0. Remember, it's always up to you to decide how much is too much. Right? Do I want the background? Do I want it to live just as a drawing like this? What feels right, what feels wrong. So I'll go ahead and do the background, but again, you decide whether it's relevant or not. So let me go ahead and go online. And once again, I have to find an image that works as a background image. So let's go and let's look at Yosemite photo. Right? And again, finding the right image is always the biggest challenge. Right? Maybe you want something that has these kind of tree type background. This might work in my context. This log is going to be problematic though, because as it comes out that side, unless I'm covering it up completely, it's going to be hard to kind of work with. So we'll keep looking. All right, not getting ideas that I like here. Let's try Yosemite Forest. See if we can get something better here. All right, picking the image of the fire, probably not the right image, not quite what you want to have shown. So you want to be careful and really preview what looks right. Let's try. So I apologize. Obviously, this is one opportunity where I'm not finding the images the way that I want them to be. Right? Maybe something like this would work. Open it in a new tab and keep looking a bit. That one might work. All right, well, let's see if one of these ones that I picked would work. Okay, we'll start with something like this. This one might be okay, given the context. It might not. Let me go ahead and download the original size. Let me show it in a folder. Maybe. There it is. Let me go ahead and copy this. And then drop it into today's folder. And then we'll go ahead and go back to Photoshop. And one of the advantages here is I can play around with which is the right image without committing to it. Obviously, I can throw one image in. If I don't like it, I can copy the mask onto another layer and see what it looks like there. So let's go ahead and put that in. I'll go to File and then Place. We'll put that background image in. It's obviously a bit on the small side. We need to make it bigger. So we'll increase the size, something like that. I'm going to go ahead and put it below the section cut. Let me commit to it here. Put it below the ground so that we can see where it would fall on the building. And I need to be a little bit careful with where my ground is and what it looks like. So in this context, the shadows are going roughly in the right direction for the shadows that I want, but the hill is getting taller here, and it's kind of going down here. So it's not quite the right look that I was going for, but it would probably work. I might adjust it a little bit, something like that. Then we can go ahead and turn on some of my other layers. I need to cut out for the building itself, so I'll turn on the color layer. Let's turn all of this off. So we're back here. Let me go ahead and use the magic wand to select that plus this. Then I'll select the inverse. Right? So let me go to Select, inverse. I'll go back to my background, and we'll click on Add Layer Mask. Oops, sorry, down here, Add Layer Mask, so that it's cut out. Oops, wrong way. Select, inverse, Add Layer Mask. Turn back on the ground. Turn off the colors. You get the idea. Okay. So in that context, it's OK. There might be a better image to use. Let's look at my other images. Nope, too much. Yeah, too much. Oh, none of those really look. I like that this slopes off to this side, but it's a little bit too far away. So in reality, I'm going to need to spend a little bit more time. This one is too close, right? The tree here would be too close for where the section cut is. So I would spend a little bit more time trying to find it. If you see on this, for example, those trees feel like they're in about the right context. The fact that it's sloping down here kind of works with the background context. Okay? I think you could actually download those images as part of this. So anyway, I'll leave it as this for right now. The point is I want to spend some time and really think through what's the right look for the background image. One of the things that can be beneficial, though, as well, is maybe you want to have this fade out at the top. So I can go back to this image and work on my layer mask with my gradient tool from black to white. And I can cause the top of the image to fade out a little bit. Now, unfortunately, when I did that, it deleted this part. So let me do a quick magic wand. Use the color background again to select just the background piece here. And then I'll use my gradient tool to feather the top of the image so that it goes to white rather than to a sharp edge. And this allows you to put it at the bottom of a presentation and not have a sharp edge that defines the section. It fades out, which is a lot of times beneficial. Remember, I can also, if this is drawing too much attention, let's turn on a few other things here. Turn these back on. All right, so I'm trying to get this back to its look here. If the color is too much, remember I can do a hue and saturation adjustment on the background layer itself. So let me go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Hue and Saturation Adjustment. Control-Alt-G to tie it to just the background. And then I could start by just toning down the color. I can make it a little bit lighter. I could also adjust the saturation so it turned more black and white. It wasn't so strong, right? I could also shift the hue to a different hue. I could make it more brown or something if I wanted it to be more like that. So the point is you can play around with a lot of different options for what feels right for your particular image and its background. All right? So now I've worked my way through. I have the section itself. I've identified the section. I have the ground that's put through. I've filled in the section. I also have a background that's been applied. I have a texture that's been applied. I have fake lighting inside the building. I have a person. It's starting to look pretty good as an overall piece. Looks like I need the dodge and burn shadows back too. Okay? So today you're going to work through this same process. Obviously it's a lot of repetition to the things that we've done previously, but you can also see where we're going with it. Okay? Remember, this is potentially one of the 4 pieces of assignment 106 that you're going to turn in. You can pick the plan, the elevation, the section, or the perspective. Remember, it's 3 of those 4. So whatever one doesn't turn out well is the one that you don't turn in. Okay? But this is part of your assignment. You get time to work on it today as class. Are there any questions? No? I always know that this is a lot to take in, but you notice that I've repeated this many times. Okay? And that starts to help it sink in a little bit more. All right, if you have any questions, let me know.